One of those leaders is Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield. Hello, Ambassador. How are you? And welcome. I was going to say hi to you outside, and here we are. My task is to introduce and then lead a short discussion with the ambassador. I will say, for those of you that don't know, you should know, she is one of the most extraordinary foreign policy leaders on the planet, someone who has been an ambassador in Liberia, someone who's been in the Foreign Service for 35 years. Now the U.S., well, we won't repeat that. And today, of course, is our ambassador to the United Nations. I've had the chance to serve alongside and learn from this extraordinary American public servant. And I have learned that in order to do what she does, you have to be able to look crises in the eye with a sense of reality and determination and find hope and possibility. And she does it time and time again. So Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Rockefeller Foundation.
Hello, everyone.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
A little exhausted, but...
Why is that?
Getting through traffic to get to your office.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'd love to talk to you about climate and opportunity and development, but I thought I'd start where I feel like we all should. I know you're putting so much of your time, effort, and leadership, as you always have, on behalf of those who are vulnerable, and dealing with multiple conflicts right now around the world, but a particularly striking humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And I wonder if you could give us an update on how you and the U.S. government are approaching the challenge in that context.
Yeah, as you all know, you watch it on TV every single day. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is horrific. It's dire. It requires all of our attention 24 hours a day to find a solution, to find a path forward. We, like you, believe that the most important step that can be taken is a ceasefire that will lead to the release of hostages and open up opportunities to get humanitarian assistance in to people who are in extraordinarily difficult situations. We are putting pressure on the Israelis every day to open up border crossings, to allow for more trucks to come in, and we're putting pressure on the Israelis to accept, as part of their own responsibilities, to provide humanitarian assistance to the people who are under their control at this time. It's not easy, as you can all imagine. It has required all hands on deck all the time. And we have the U.S., we have people on the ground. We have them on the ground 24/7, working on this constantly. But until this war ends, we will continue to see people suffer. And we have to do everything in our power to end the suffering.
Well, and one of the things that you're doing as a team is searching for a more durable and sustainable end to the conflict and even to the architecture of peaceful relationships in the Middle East. It strikes me that there's a lot written publicly, of course, about it, and I'm not sure how much you can say, but can you give us a little bit of insight as to why the Biden team is optimistic, or at least thinking that in the midst of this crisis, you might be able to create some sort of an architectural shift in the Middle East?
Raj, I don't know if I'd use the word optimistic, but I will say that we are committed and we are firm in that commitment to finding a solution. And we have to be, because if we're not, you lose hope. And none of us want people to lose hope. So again, we're all working every day to find a viable way forward, a viable solution that will lead to a two-state solution, which we know is what is needed to bring peace to the Palestinian people and also provide for security for the people of Israel.
Well, thank you for pursuing those efforts, and I've seen you in action in crisis after crisis, and I'm certainly optimistic that it's a great team that's working on the task and the challenge. So thank you. I also recall, as we've worked on so many challenges before together, that sometimes these acute crises do appropriately take the bulk of the political energy of, say, the United Nations or the Security Council or others. So how do you, in that context, also maintain a focus on, record levels of people suffering from hunger and having acute humanitarian needs around the world? I think the World Food Program has estimated that right now, a combination of conflict and climate has resulted in, I think, 330 plus million people needing urgent humanitarian and food support. How are we doing? Are we able, as a global community, to, especially in a world with a lot of populist political campaigns happening, are we able to both address the immediate crises and continue to invest in these efforts to have broad-based humanitarian and development assistance be robust?
Look, we have to. And we have to because of the it's actually 345 million. I saw in my brief today. I probably wouldn't have corrected that, except that it's 15 million more people who are on the verge of hunger. And those numbers are increasing every single day. When I started at the UN in 2021, my first signature event as president of the Security Council was an event that focused on hunger, on food insecurity. And I've done it 3 times in 3 presidencies, and my next presidency will be in December, and I plan to focus on it again because we have not found a solution. And we're dealing with the existential threat of climate change, which I know the Rockefeller Foundation and you've been working on very consistently, the impact that you're having on food security in places like Nigeria and other places in Africa and around the world. I think we should give you a hand of applause for that. Because, it really, it's going to require all of us to address the issue of food insecurity. And it's not just climate, it's what food costs for people every day. The war in Ukraine contributed to increasing the cost of food. It is the impact that COVID had on food. And then worse, we see it every single day. This is what we're seeing in Gaza. This is what we're seeing in Sudan. It is the impact that conflict has on food insecurity. So with those 4 challenges, we all have to come together, the private sector, foundations, governments, to bring our resources to bear to start decreasing those numbers of people who are dealing with acute hunger. And note, we're using the word acute hunger. There's still millions and millions more people who still go to bed hungry, and they're not in acute hunger.
Well, in 1990, I think about 14% of the world's global population suffered from hunger. And 2015, when we set the SDGs and said zero hunger is a feasible target, it was based on a trend line that had seen that 14 come down to about 7%, 6.5%. And now it's trending back up again. And we certainly have internal analyses that shows that because of climate change and climate pressure, you could easily see it going back up to 13, 14% of the global population, a much larger global population. Do you believe the political will exists amongst, OECD economies and others to come together and sort of reinvest in agriculture, in food security, in expanding school feeding programs, in building the safety nets that I know you advocated for during the immediate aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the consequences that caused? Is there something different we can do in our politics to kind of have a higher ambition? Because right now, it feels like we're losing this fight.
Yeah, I do think that political will is there. I think we have to be creative. The know-how is also a question. How do we do it? We can't use the methodologies that we used in the 1990s. or even the methodologies that we used in 2000. I think we've seen a change. So we have to look at new ways of addressing hunger. We have to look at new actors to bring into the picture. We have to look at AI as a resource that we can use. Bringing the private sector, as I noted, I think is going to be an important element. This is not about aid. This is about resilience. It's about development if we're going to have a lasting impact.
Yeah, I think we agree. And frankly, one thing, Roy Steiner's here from our team. We have our food team has been working aggressively on building out a larger school feeding coalition with you and others, because we see hundreds of millions of kids that could potentially be getting school meals, learning nutrition practices, and having their sourcing practices change those food systems and those local economies. But you mentioned AI. And you've sponsored a declaration around sustainable development and artificial intelligence. We do a lot of work in energy systems and energy systems planning, and have now deployed AI tools to help do energy systems planning, which sounds really technical and really nerdy. But actually, it's the thing that unlocks battery energy storage in the state of Maharashtra at scale in India, which allows for more renewables on the grid, which prevents the need for more coal on the grid, and has huge climate impacts. What's your vision for AI and sustainable development, and how fast do you think that set of tools can be adopted, in particular by sometimes UN agencies that maybe the whole world looks and says maybe they do or don't have the capacity to use these tools effectively?
Yeah, the AI is moving faster than we can imagine. And so we have jumped onto a fast-moving train to start to bring AI into the picture. When my team brought to me the idea of us putting forward a resolution on AI in the General Assembly, I'll admit, I don't even know that I admitted it to them at the time, that I thought it was going to be extraordinarily hard. And I worried that we might not succeed. We did more than succeed. We got 124 countries to sponsor the resolution, including China. And part of the reason so many countries jumped on the bandwagon is because they see AI as that panacea of what can be done if we are able to use this technology in a way that addresses the food resiliency challenge that we all are facing. And we see also, and this is part of the reason that resolution was so widely supported, there is a huge digital divide between developed countries and the Global South. And the Global South they want to be able to take advantage of this technology so that they too can help their people's livelihoods improve. So this resolution is big. And I think the resolution was long overdue and probably way past time. So what we're doing now, we probably should have been doing 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, because the technology is advancing so quickly. So we just need to harness that technology. We don't want to stop it. We want to harness it. We want to put some guardrails in place so that it is used for good and not bad, and that it helps to build resiliency. It will help people deal with hunger.
You know, and I read this morning that in the state of Virginia, AI demand, or data centers in particular, now consume nearly 30% of total energy in the state system. Almost all of the modeling and assumptions about global energy needs have dramatically underestimated, because of how new and how quickly this field is moving, the demands of AI. And almost every developing country has shockingly high energy costs that will prevent effective local deployment of that capability. Do you include in your AI resolution at the UN the efforts that need to be made to build out enough renewable electrification and energy access to support an equitable kind of presence for those tools and technologies?
The resolution didn't get into that kind of specificity, but I think those who are working on these issues know that we have to address these energy deficiencies that are taking place all over the world. When you look at countries, and I always remember I was Assistant Secretary for Africa, and someone showed me a map of electricity availability on the continent of Africa. And for the first time, I had a concept of what the dark continent was, because there was very little electricity across the continent. And so it is so important that we use new technology, that we use clean energy, that we bring electricity, because electricity is about making sure we use AI, but it's also about education. It's about being able to bring these countries into a productive capacity that they can address their own needs.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that map. And I remember
You've seen that map.
I've seen that map, and we are deeply inspired by that map. But here's the reality: is 50% of the world's landed solar radiation hits Africa, and less than 1% of the total global build-out of renewable energy over the last 20 plus years has taken place on the continent, while 600 million people live without energy access. Are you confident the IDA replenishment for the World Bank this year, or other G7 kind of financing commitments that have been made, is there a political push to kind of raise the ambition to kind of tackle this problem at scale?
So the first
Or do
question.
you have advice for us? Is what can we do to create the political
Am I confident?
push?
No, I'm not. I'm not confident, but I think we have to push that agenda. We have to push it harder. We have to push the ambitions higher so that we can address these issues. I think people see the problem, they understand the problem, but the ambitions are not yet in that same place.
Yeah. And I just think at the end of the day, if we don't address the energy access issue in Africa, we will have a significant uptick in climate migration and otherwise, because there's just no opportunity without energy. So thank you for your efforts and your leadership. I want to, on climate overall, could you just describe how you think the UN architecture is addressing climate change? Like, is climate change a topic at the Security Council that is getting serious dialogue? Is it effectively pushed aside because of the urgent crises in Gaza and Israel and Ukraine? Or what can we do to maintain the visibility and the relevance and the urgency of this issue in that specific setting?
You know, back in, I think, December of 21, Niger was on the Security Council, and they wanted to push forward a resolution that looks at climate and conflict, climate as a peace and security issue. And there were members of the council, and I don't have to name them, who were absolutely opposed to that. And so the resolution was defeated. And we have brought that forward several times over the course of the past 3.5 years for the council to address. There are members of the council that think, well, climate is an issue that should not be dealt with in the Security Council. It's an issue that should be dealt with in ECOSOC. It's an issue that should be dealt with in some of the more technical agencies. We see climate as a peace and security issue, and the Security Council has to address climate and the impact of climate in a more direct way. I think we have failed in that area, but it's not for lack of trying, and we will keep trying. I was with the Secretary General yesterday, and he said to me that we needed to amplify and really ramp up our engagement on climate because he's beginning to see some diminished interest, and we can't allow that to happen.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're so focused on that, because I can't imagine how the world succeeds in this fight if our foremost security councils are not able to prioritize that. I'm not sure how much more time we have. I think I'm getting a signal, but I do want to ask one. I do want to ask one other question, because you're such a notable leader on this issue for such a long time, and that is around women and girls and opportunity. And there are a lot of partners here that Pat Mitchell, so many others that are part of our efforts to ensure that the fight against climate change brings uplift and opportunity, whether it's women farmers, women entrepreneurs that use energy access to transform their businesses or livelihoods, women community health workers that address the fact that it was, 120 some degrees yesterday in India. And so what is your vision for how the UN, the Security Council, the global fight on climate change can actually reverse the trend and allow more opportunity and dignity for women and girls in particular?
You know, first and foremost, we have to be constantly focused on 1325 and include issues of gender in every product that we produce in the council and every discussion that we have in the council. We know that women and girls are the biggest victims of conflict, for example. When you look at what is happening in Gaza, when you look at what is happening in Sudan right now, where women and girls are really impacted in an extraordinary way by what is happening. So we have to make sure that we bring a gender lens to everything we do in the Security Council, that we focus on the impact of women and girls. And the most important is education. And I think about Afghanistan, where 50% of the girls are being restricted, being barred from access to education, which means that they will not be prepared to live in the future. They're not going to be prepared to be contributors to their societies. And again, education elsewhere in the world is equally important. This morning I went to visit a group of refugees who just landed in New York on their way to resettlement in the United States. And I met one family with 4 girls who had been living in a refugee camp in Ethiopia for 13 years. And one of the girls said she wanted to be a plastic surgeon, and the other one wanted to be a business person, and one wanted to be a runner. They had ambitions that they can pursue because they have opportunity. In Sudan, I went to visit a refugee camp where I spoke to girls who had been victims of rape, and one of those girls said, "They took my ambition away." We have to ensure that girls' ambitions, girls' futures are enshrined in everything that we do, whether it's in the Security Council or in our bilateral relationships and funding to countries, that they have to take into consideration how what they do will impact the role of women in their societies.
And can I just say, I think it makes all of us here that are Americans super excited that you are our representative at the United Nations, because I can imagine all of those young girls getting to meet you is in and of itself a moment they'll remember the rest of their life.
Well, I certainly will remember it. I don't know that they will. They're going to get a lot more memories that will change their lives. But for me, what that did today was give me the strength to keep fighting for them.
Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you.
I think that getting to meet the ambassador in this context helps all of us remember that this fight against climate change is actually a fight for people. And there's no better representative, I think, to carry that message forward. So thank you.